Welcome to Secure the Soil, your podcast for California's food system, for those who want to help create a greener, healthier, better world. We're going to start here in California. We're starting with the Agricultural Land Equity Task Force recommendations, and I'm here with none other than the chairman of the task force,
Sure.
a legend, someone I have a lot of respect for, who's been in the field with me, who's been in this thing since day one.
Day
I'm
one.
real proud. I'm proud to call him a friend, a brother, somebody I am happy is on our side, and I appreciate him making the time to be with us. Nelson Hawkins, everybody, clap it up.
Yes, sir.
You-
Appreciate y'all. Thank you for having me.
Man,
And long time overdue.
man,
Time overdue.
where we at now?
Yeah, so in the backdrop, what we got out here is the land that Uzuma Farmer Collective acquired back in 2023. That's a whole story in and of itself. Conversation for another day.
Uh-huh.
And a powerful conversation that we were both part of early on with our work with the BIPOC Advisory Committee, CDFA. But yeah, we got 22 acres of land, and we are in our foundational years as an organization, filling out the land and getting our vision manifested in real time, getting the infrastructure in place so that we can adequately accommodate multiple farm businesses to realize their dreams and to uplift their success. And we are out here in the Sacramento region, just outside of Sacramento in Yolo County.
Listen, this is Secure the Soil, man. I'm excited. This is what it's all about. This is the whole vision of the show, vision of this podcast. Nelson was the first person I called. I said, look, man, I got this idea. Tell me what you think. Is it okay? Is it cool? You know what I'm saying? But before we jump too much into all of that, like, tell the people a little bit more about you as a person. Who is Nelson, man? Let's tell them about you.
So, I think a lot of times when we talk about, answering that question, who we are, I think a lot of times we get caught up with conditioning or what have you in what we do. But first and foremost, I'm a human being, multifaceted, dynamic human being. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, I'm a father. Some things that I do is I wear many hats. This is one of them. By that I mean I fulfill many roles in different situations. One of those hats that I wear is I'm the farmer founder of We Grow Farms. We are a small scale farm. We started in West Sacramento with our urban farm, and we currently cultivate on 2 acres collectively. Some of those, actually 2.5 acres, 2 of those acres are here on our Ujoma land, and we are certified organic, cultivate seasonal, diversified, socially meaningful produce using agroecological techniques. And then we support access to our produce for local communities while strengthening their relationship to the land. So that's one hat I wear as a farmer, as a farm business owner, and we've operated since 2018. And I can get into that too a little bit more in depth. Another hat that I wear, another role that I fulfill is I'm a co-founder of Ultimate Farmer Collective, and I fulfill the collective executive director role, focusing on agricultural projects and programs on the land. And our mission is to secure access to resources for the success of Black farmers in the greater Sacramento region. And we exist to fulfill that mission. Ujima is not just the name, but it's a fourth principle in Kwanzaa, and that's what's inspired our name. The principle is cooperative economics, to build up our own businesses and to thrive together. And so we've incorporated that vision and that principle within our organization and how we're facilitating multiple farm businesses to be able to have access to land, to share cost of land, infrastructure, tools, equipment, some of those that you've seen today that we've materialized over time on the land so that we all have a leg up and we all can thrive together. But we also have our own businesses that we can fulfill. And being on the same land, we can share knowledge and other resources together too. But we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are existing to fulfill the mission, but in doing so, securing the resources. We're the vehicle to get those resources for the farmers to be able to share and utilize on the land. You were here early on when we first acquired the land, and now you can see that vision materializing, in real time. It's a beautiful thing.
Man.
And we're, still on the way to keep on building as well.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I definitely remember this as an idea. I remember the inception, man. I remember this being a possibility. I remember you finding the land. I remember, we had to go through so much ups and downs, and joining this organization and joining this and doing that and doing this
Yeah.
and going over here and then having to restructure. It's like we were both Ujama and Australia Bridge were both birthed. We're like, twins to a degree. Like we were both birthed uh
Yeah, same time.
at the same time, with
Yeah,
same paths, different, you know, mechanisms and purposes, but ultimately the same mission, just to bring
yeah,
resources to the people.
yeah,
Me more so, through sharing the word outreach, and you all actually getting the resource and getting the land. And me
yeah.
just want to do my part to help get the land and get the
Yes.
resources. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Staying
yeah,
in my lane,
yeah.
not trying to be a
Connected.
farmer, not trying to be, I'm just learning like, no, I'm not that,
We all have a role to
you know.
play within the food system,
Yeah.
and it's important to be connecting folks
Uh-huh.
to where the food comes from.
Yeah.
That's a heavy lift, but it's a necessary part of it.
Uh-huh.
So I salute you for that.
Hey, thank
Yeah,
you, man.
yeah,
Man, so you were on the task force, bro.
yeah.
I wanted us to start with Um, we talking about the food system, this very intricate thing. None of us would be here without land. I know there's so many other things that are necessary in this food system, and we could definitely continue to do more episodes to break down all the other stuff. You know what I'm saying?
As
Definitely.
as as as
But
expected, yeah.
I think that the major issue for me initiative was the conclusion of the task force that you all did and the recommendations being put to the public, and me just saying I don't want it to go to the wayside. I don't want it to just be something that people just say, "Oh, that was great," and then we just let it kind of phase away. And especially with this climate where we've seen so much on a federal level is trying to not only stop any
Yeah,
concept of equity, but also undo
undo
equity
it.
that was done.
Yeah,
So I felt it's very necessary to share the information. And I did, like I said, I called you first, man. Like, what you think, So now we up here, man. So
yeah,
I wanna to anytime we talk, we was on the phone at one time for like an hour, man.
yeah.
There's so much insight that you have that I want to do
Appreciate
what I
that.
can to pull that insight out of you, the wisdom and the knowledge and experience that you have, and then just give it to the people.
Yeah.
Because you're a relatively quiet man. And
Leave
it's
it there,
when it's
yeah.
something that's like about, you can go. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying? I think like anytime we talk, you could go because
yeah,
I know how to like just
yeah,
pull
the
it out.
passion
Yeah,
flows, yeah.
we both very passionate people,
Yeah,
especially about this topic, man.
yeah, yeah,
So I just was like,
yeah,
it's very important as my first guest.
yeah.
The first person that can come here and just say spiel, I was like, it gotta be you, bro. So
Okay, I
I
appreciate that.
appreciate you
Yeah,
for
yeah, thank you, man.
making the
Yeah,
time
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and allowing
likewise.
us to come up here to Sacramento to
Yeah,
sit down with you. You're busy man, like your father, you're a farmer. You
yeah,
just want to do your thing. You want to do your thing, get out the way.
yeah,
So I know taking a Sunday off, a off day.
yeah.
Now you was already working
I was
today.
already
You already
working.
working.
This is my
So it's
day.
not even an off day. It's a work day. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate you taking the time to sit down with
Likewise.
me and we, just answer some questions
Yeah,
to get some insight for the people.
yeah.
So
Appreciate the
out of
time, man.
respect for your time,
Yeah,
I'm gonna jump into it.
okay. First, let me just show everybody
Go ahead.
while I'm just holding this thick book right here, right? This is the final copy, the report.
Uh-huh.
It's called Advancing Agricultural Land Equity in California. This is what the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force was tasked to do, and we did it, y'all. This is the final copy. It's almost 180 pages all together with appendixes and all that, and example, model ordinances and a lot of rich material, rich resources. So I just wanted to uplift this. This is what we came together to achieve and to create, and we're holding it today. So I encourage everybody. You can get the copy of this online at the Strategic Growth Council website. There's a digital copy. But I just want to uplift that this is the full report and recommendations that we came up with to present to the governor and the legislation of California to advance agricultural land equity.
Shout out to the children. The children's here, man.
Yeah, you
Family, man.
got
And it's
got
yeah.
the
I
yeah,
mean, much respect to that, bro, because to me, that's like I wanted to really, break that down, you know, um, for myself, and now because we could try to break this down, we're gonna be here all day. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So it's
It's a lot. It's a
180
lot.
pages, man.
Yeah, yeah. We'll flip through it real quick. There are a lot of visuals. I mean, the whole episode could be about this, you know, just talking about it. Hey, hey. uh, and just summarizing it, and just having a brief overview of it. But I think one thing I just want to express to the audience is that the task force was the right set of people, the right, level of experience. Everybody had rich lived experience that they brought to the table,
True.
and the perspectives that helped us cover all the bases, so to speak, cover all of the nuances and the different aspects of what comes with agricultural land equity, or just land in California, and how we can shift the needle and shift the power back to the people, and at the very least create access points and remove the barriers for folks that are coming into it, the next generation, and how we ground truth everything. And it was very important for us as a task force is that we get the voices of those that are most affected by land inequities, that are affected by this crisis in California. And so we made a concerted effort to meet throughout the state of California, all four corners, all as much in many regions as we could, all the way from San Diego to Ventura, all the way to Humboldt, Sacramento, the Bay. We were in Inland Empire, we were in Coachella, we were in the desert. All the different regions that we could touch, and then we brought in a lot of site visits where we did meet throughout the state of California, and then we also uh, had hundreds of survey responses to get people's experience, and to be able to gather data. And we hosted listening sessions for tribal engagements and like specific groups throughout California. One thing I do want to reflect on as well, and I mentioned this in our last meeting with the task force, is that what makes us unique as a task force, although we're talking about policy recommendations and submitting those to elected officials, a lot of times those folks that are affected by the types of injustices that we're addressing are shy to talk with government officials for valid reasons, right? Sometimes for their own protection. So the ones that need to be heard the most, there's just there's an invisible barrier just by the trust issues that come with interfacing with the government, right? But with us, it's different because we're already working within the communities that we're representing. So folks were more open to share their real stories with us because of our positionality and who we were as individual task force members. And so we hold a lot of power just by who we are in our individual work, and then collectively as a task force, that people were more than willing to share. And it was almost like this starvation for this type of thing to exist, that people were willing and excited that this happened, and we came together to form these recommendations. And at the end of the day, they're recommendations. They don't have a lot of political power, or really any political power in of itself. But we do hold a lot of influence because of who we are and the authority and positionality that we have as members of the task force. So I want to uplift that before we get into anything else. And, folks can read the recommendations. We came up with like 6 solid recommendations, from tribal sovereignty to restorative land fund to urban agriculture. We covered a lot of bases. I know we could go another 2.5, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. We barely scratched the surface. But it's important that, folk like you are pushing this forward, and others that can make sure that this doesn't just end up like another policy recommendations collecting dust on a shelf. We make it very clear that this is just the start of the work, and I'm excited to see what people will do with it and how it's built upon. Yeah.
I think what we are seeing with the USDA is like a real good example of like why we can't only do policy.
Yeah.
Like it got to be policy, but we got to like for them to say we're going to stop a grant and just freeze hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Just overnight, it's crazy. You know what I'm saying? Stopping land, like that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? So, and I know, like we saw, there's the USDA, a lot of federal government has been actively, very vocally coming against the work that y'all did.
Yeah.
very vocally threatening to sue California, threatening to sue the governor.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Really like really trying to intimidate
It's
us
wild. Yeah.
into not creating equity within our own state of California.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, you're not gonna scare us
Yeah.
and intimidate us from creating equity.
It's crazy because it's not even like we're undoing or taking anything from anybody else. The numbers are so skewed in their favor as it is. We're just trying to get a little piece of the pie at the very least.
Man.
You know what I'm saying? So they don't even have to do anything. They don't have to do any of that. The inequities would still persist.
No part of this says take land from white people. No, that doesn't exist in this whole report.
Keep that up. And people feel threatened by the idea of that. And, you know, anyways, that's a whole conversation. But yeah,
we have it here though, because that's like that's a part of it. Like,
yeah.
Is the nuances, is the mindset behind equity. People equity, they're associated with progressiveness, associated with liberal, and associated with political party. And then it turns into something that we're talking about this right here.
Right.
And by the end of the conversation, we're way over here.
Yeah.
We're like, no, this has nothing to do with Republican, Democrat, left wing, right wing. This black, white. It's just like, hey, this is what is actually happening.
Yeah.
It's extremely inequitable.
Yeah.
This is how we can create equity.
And remove the barriers that have existed, remedy the injustices that have happened over centuries. Even in California, we're talking about just California.
Facts.
You know, there's been some traumatic and painful things that have happened here on the land here, what we call California. So the truth is in our favor. You know, it's just a bunch of noise, and you know, it comes with the, you know, blows with the wind when it comes to like the pendulum swinging with power of political parties and things like that. So I don't want to give it, like, I don't even want to talk too much more about it because it's like we're giving it more power than it really has, you know, but it is something to be aware of. And it's good that we do at least touch on it because it reinforces why we exist and why we're doing it. You know, that's how I see it. It's like, okay, people think, oh, well, you know, slavery happened so time ago, genocide, everything happened so long ago, as if it doesn't have an effect. But clearly still affecting like the people in the modern day with their phones and the modern, you know, luxuries of life. You know, maybe it's out of touch that these are still compounding upon each other, and because it hasn't been addressed, and even it's still even happening actively. I mean, if it's an active attack, it's still happening actively. You know, it doesn't happen so much explicitly like it used to, maybe. You know, that more or less, but it is the results and the outcomes are still persisting, where land is being lost at significant rates. Still, it's not going in other directions. It's still being lost and taken and stolen, but it's happening behind the scenes in a way that most people are not going to have any idea about. You know, they're not going to have any connection or any type of like awareness of these things still happening. So there's that part of it, and that's to be addressed as well. But yeah. Anyways, that's all we gotta say on that part.
We can, you know, we can get up in it, man.
Yeah.
But I got my first question.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay. First, so if someone who just has no understanding, let me see the mic. If someone who has no real just understanding of how agricultural land works in this state, right? How would you map the system briefly, right? As far as like who actually controls how the land moves and who controls how to get access?
Yeah, it's a heavy question. So as I see it, comes down to those that have the most wealth and power and influence, political power and influence. And that's all related to wealth and money too, because land is commodified in this system. And then when it's put onto the market, you know, money talks. You know, if someone's selling land for whatever reason it is, they're retiring or they need to, you know, bring in, you know, they need to liquidate their assets or what have you, or, you know, looking for intergenerational, whatever the reason is, you know, whoever's going to have the money to buy it, you know, they're going to sell it to. If it came down to, oh, I can sell to somebody next week, or, you know, it's going to take 2 years and I got to wait for somebody, they're going to probably sell it to somebody sooner than later who has the money. So there's that aspect of it. There's also a lot of like when it comes to like someone looking to get access to land, there's a lot of overlapping systems that come into play. The market forces are the biggest one, I think, because again, cash is king. Who has the money talks. They can buy up the land soon. They're in a position to acquire land much faster than anybody else that doesn't have the money. But there's also zoning laws. There's also layers of politics and legal arrangements between those that own land and those that want access to land. I like to put it in terms of landholder and land user. I guess colonial definitions, I guess, lack of better words, of like landlord and things like that. That goes back to its own history and things like that. But those are the terms that we're still using today. But when it comes down to it, those that are holding the land have the power and control over what can be used on the land, more or less. Of course, there's like legal systems that come into play too. But if someone's just trying to access land that somebody else, owns, whoever owns it calls the shots on what the land user can do. So when we're talking about land tenure, it uncovers all of the rights and responsibilities and obligations to using the land, but the one who owns it really benefits in the system. So those are layers to it. Yeah, we can start with that and bring the conversation.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what is the biggest disconnect that policymakers think land access works versus how it actually works for farmers on the ground? Makers, what is they from your seat, makers who say we're gonna create this thing for land people to get access to land, for farmers to get access to land, versus how it actually is to get land as a farmer. Where's the disconnect? Do you think there's a disconnect, or if you see, what is the biggest disconnect between the people who trying to create stuff for people to get land and the people who actually trying to get land, like the policymakers, as far as that?
There's a lot.
You've seen both sides. You've been
Yeah.
in the rooms, you know what I'm saying, for years.
Yeah. I mean, I'll break it down in a couple of different ways. The disconnect, I think, is just the physical disconnect between the decision makers, the policy makers, and where our food comes from. And there's just people's disconnect between like where their food comes from. There's that part of it. But when it comes to like people, elected officials and policymakers that got political power to make legislative change and policy changes, if they have no connection with the land and farmers directly, they're not going to have their vantage point is going to be out of context with all the nuances that come with it. So if they don't come from a farming family, if they're not involved in agriculture, especially, or they don't have a direct connection in relationship with farmers, they're going to be out of touch. So there's that level of disconnect. I'm generalizing. There's plenty of elected officials that represent agricultural districts and regions, or come from farming families, or some that are still involved in agriculture. I'm generalizing, but the decisions are made, in Sacramento, in California, Sacramento, the state of the capital, or the capitalist. So, that's the arena that decisions are made. And so farmers either got to go there or they got to go to the farmland to be able to even like hear the stories and the nuances and all of like the challenges that come with it. So there's that level. And I think also the political process is very slow. There's a lot of bureaucracy that gets in the way to making the changes that need to happen at the time they need to happen. In agriculture, there's a season for everything. Like if you don't plant your seeds a certain time, you miss that window, you're not going to be able to get a harvest. And I mean that literally and metaphorically in this situation. So like there's a time and season for everything, and the political process has its own season, of course, as we've learned with like the budget request and things like that in the whole budget cycle. But there's a snail pace that comes with making change on the legislative and policy side. And there's a lot of like politics that get involved in that whole process that could, even if you have momentum and you make changes, it can be undone. Just like we were talking about with USDA, not even just like it gets squashed, but it can be undone, all the work that's been done before. So there's also like the dynamics that play with like the political atmosphere that slows the progress. Some other layers of disconnect that I see for policymakers specifically is that there's a lot of overlapping, interconnected systems that need to be addressed. So there's like market forces, there's land tenure rights, there's affordability, of course, there's zoning laws, there's different levels and layers to factors that affect access and create barriers to access. Financing is another thing. they're all involved in the decision making of a farmer, rancher, or land steward, right? All those factors I just mentioned, it affect how someone can access land. From a policy change perspective, it's like a lot of times I see changes and solutions can only be made at that level, one at a time.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it might affect a little bit, but these are all interconnected factors
Mhm.
that affect, like I said,
Mhm.
affect the decision making on a farmer to get this land or that land, if they're going to stay on this land, or set of rights that can affect the land that they're on, if they're on land, and their relationship with the landowner, if they don't own the land themselves, or if they do own the land, everything that comes with that. And so that's something that gets in the way, or that can be a disconnect in how policymakers can affect change.
Mhm.
And there's also the fact that related to that, these isolated factors, but there's also like agencies and political departments that are like left hand talking, don't know how to talk to the right hand, don't know what the right hand's doing. So there's also the aspect, and we talked about it too in our task force, of an interagency review of the recommendations. So we had an interagency review of our recommendations, and it's important that these isolated or independent government agencies
Mhm.
there needs to be some level of coordination, because they don't operate in vacuums. And it
Yeah.
says like we're talking about Sigma, Sustainable Groundwater Management Agency, that's going to govern groundwater use in California, right?
Mhm.
That example, right? It's been like 10 years in the making to just govern groundwater, or what, however they want to talk about it, but for good reason, because it's like there's so much nuances. But just bringing up that example for now. There's like that level. Anything that's got to do with water. There's also anything that's got to do with like air. There's also anything that's got to do with like land markets and like um, zoning regulations. And there's like city, there's county, there's state. So a lot of these levels and layers of like government, I guess governance, for lack of a better word, where overall have their different jurisdictions, and they're like isolated, and they don't always talk about or interact with each other.
Mhm.
But when it comes to like tribal sovereignty and like needing to engage with the indigenous peoples of the land that they're on, it's got like their perspective needs to be included in every layer,
Mhm.
for example, and that doesn't always happen, let alone do they know how to engage with folks. I went on a tangent a little bit on that one, but my point is that there's a lot of isolated factors that you can't solve this inequity crisis by itself.
Mhm.
We got to
Mhm.
include and have a comprehensive approach to addressing every layer as they are
Yeah.
interconnected. It needs to be a system.
Yeah.
It's systemic, so we gotta.
It gotta be the state. It can't be
Yeah,
the CDFA or the RCD or the no. It gotta be the state of California. It has to be
yeah,
something that collectively
yeah. Right,
things in place.
right,
That does no. I
right,
feel you.
right, right, right.
Because sometimes the CDFA it's got their own thing going on, and you got the
Yeah,
Department of Conservation got their own thing going on.
yeah,
You got the Bureau of Land Management
yeah,
way over there.
yeah.
You got the foresters over there. You know what
Right,
I'm saying?
right.
So
Sometimes they'll be pointing us in different directions.
then you got the Strategic Growth Council, their own thing. You know what I'm saying? I feel you, man.
That's a big part.
Definitely give it like give it all. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? We have
yeah,
to know all the barriers
yeah,
so we can deal with all the barriers.
yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So I'm gonna ask you a little bit about like your time on the task force.
yeah,
From this experience, not even to be negative, but just was there ever like tension or disagreements? And then like how did you all define solutions? I think that's important because we all deal with stuff.
yeah,
And how do you all who are all having a common goal who come to times where you all might not see eye to eye? How did you all create solutions and work through that? A little left question, but it's
yeah,
I think it's important with this work,
yeah,
especially dealing with policy. We dealing with trying to create equity.
yeah. That's a great question. I think that, just reflecting on it real quick, I didn't see a whole lot. I don't remember a whole lot of like big contentious disagreements that
Mhm.
were like sticking points.
Mhm.
I think what was unique about this task force and who was involved is like we all have a lot of shared vision and
Mhm.
values, because we're all coming together for solving the land inequity
Mhm.
crisis, right? So we already come in, those that are willing to do the work and show up at that table already have an intention just
Mhm.
to work towards solutions, right?
Mhm.
So I think we had a common goal, and we had a common like work, like those that came together and those that were appointed, we're all coming and doing work that's very much aligned,
Mhm.
more or less. We might have specific like lanes that
Mhm.
each of us are in, CDFA or maybe like land rights or indigenous rights or focus on socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers rights and issues and challenges or beginning farmer. Like there's different or RCD, there's different like lanes that we're coming to the table from and in. But we early on in the task force we had ground rules about disagreements. I think that set a solid tone and momentum for us and how we would engage in disagreements respectfully. And so we had a framework, whether we like realized it or not. It was kind of like baked into our like culture, so to speak, as a task force and how we interacted with each other. There wasn't a point where there was any like heated arguments. So I think that was a factor too. We also had strong facilitation support. So
Mhm.
when there was disagreements, like the facilitator was able to guide those
Mm.
in a way that was not uh, um, too
Mhm.
contentious. Able to like guide us back in our common goals and things like that. But to answer your question, I think one or to expand on on answering your question, one thing that did stick out to me as far as like a pain point or a sticking point in a sense of like people were emotionally invested in and responded to was around who is prioritized,
Mhm. Just understandable.
which is
Everybody like
understandable.
me, my
Right,
people
my people.
me
Yeah, yeah,
first.
exactly,
Understand.
exactly. So picking apart that was a big thing, especially when we talk about reparations.
Mhm.
That's always a topic that gets into that level of
Think they
everybody.
not even in
Yeah,
not like they don't deserve.
right.
So much has been done to so many different cultures
Yeah.
and races and peoples and
Yes.
creeds that we
Yes.
all
Yes.
deserve
Yeah. And
it's very new.
it's very
Mhm.
nuanced, and we made it a point and had the intention to make sure that we didn't get into an oppression Olympics
Yeah, exactly.
conversation,
Yeah.
because that's what it often spirals into. And so
It's not me
so
versus you.
yeah, yeah, we
Mhm.
wanna make sure that we're all, we have a common enemy and we're pushing our interests forward. But yeah, it's like there's always that underlying like prioritizing the food
Mhm.
in addressing especially historic injustices on this land that caused a lot of trauma and pain.
Mm.
So those were moments that came up that I think, but we navigated them well in a way that the conversation got emotional, but it was all from a common respect,
Mhm.
and we were able to all collectively learn
Mhm.
through those
Mhm.
conversations and learn a lot about other people's
Mhm.
uh, um, cultures and histories on this land
Mhm.
relating to the topic at hand.
Mhm.
So that's what I remember, but being one of the biggest sticky points. But we navigated it well, and like I said, we had the right group of folks that
Mhm.
came together on a common goal.
I
Eh,
think that definitely is key.
yeah.
Is starting with people who are on the same page and then
Yes.
having some kind of framework and then having some kind of facilitation.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Important pieces that.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is that as the older I get, the more I'm learning.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't know what will happen to the quote unquote African American.
Yeah.
You might
Yeah.
think that, oh, we are everybody, and you realize no,
A
people
lot of
have
people
no
don't
idea
have no
what
idea, and they'll
we
be
went
like,
on. And I had to be like, "Oh, you really don't know what happened."
Yeah, out
Still
of touch.
I'm
Yeah.
still talking to people like, "Hey, y'all know about Allensburg?" There's people who've been in Allensburg who've been in California older than me
Yeah.
who've never heard of Allensburg,
Never heard of it.
never heard of
Yeah.
Allensburg,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's how do we reframe it with ourselves to listen and to provide some education?
Right. So
Because we are in this state together, and a part of equity is
yeah.
understanding the nuances
Yeah.
of what we all have to get our needs met,
Yeah.
our needs met based upon our actual needs. And we
Right.
all have different needs, but it is our system we
Yeah.
got to figure out together because it is very
Yeah.
nuanced, bro. Like as I'm getting older, I'm realizing, okay, it is nuanced. It's not just as simple as I'm black, I went through this, give me this. Especially me as a Moor, who
It's
I have my own relationship with being quote unquote black versus being indigenous versus being African American. versus being somebody of
Right.
color.
Right.
It's
That
very
this
nuanced
is.
internally.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know what I'm saying?
That's a whole
So of course it's
conversation. Yeah.
nuanced externally because
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
ourselves are mix of
Mix of,
stuff.
yeah, and diverse.
You
Yeah.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
We get lumped into the same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
She's black, but she's not African American.
Right.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It's
And
like,
people, how
like
people understand.
I
Yeah.
come from I come from I don't even what you talking about?
Yeah.
And not even in a negative way. It's just like as I'm
Right.
getting older, I'm learning like, yeah, it is very not
Yes.
everybody knows about slavery
Yeah.
and people
Yeah.
are like, okay, that's cool, but hey, I went through slavery too. I went through this too.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
My
so
people. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm mixed. I see. I get a whole breadth of things on that conversation in different time period.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think reparations is that
yeah,
complex
it is.
to solve for reparations in this land.
Mhm.
That's a whole
Yeah.
that's a whole
We
can't
have
even like really
we have
talk
a
about it here
we
like
have
we should have.
a reparations tax force. They create a whole report too, which is very nuanced, but it's
Yeah,
something
it's
for us
something.
to look at to at least
Yeah,
educate ourselves on as well for
y-
people who really don't know